Hello, and welcome along to another episode of the Life Force Health podcast with me, Ben Calder, from the Centre for Integral Health in Shrewsbury. Thank you for listening in today. Today, I'm really excited as we have Jackie Allatson with me here today, who is a midwife based in Leicestershire and also a holistic and hypnotherapist, working specifically in the area of helping with childbirth, and she's also a certified birth trauma resolution practitioner. Jackie, hello, and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. Can I say thank you for saying my surname properly?
I'm glad I got that right. That was perfect.
It was perfect.
Good. Number one prize for the day. I got your name right. So thank you for joining me, Jackie. This is a real honour for me. It's been a really beautiful thing to have been connected to the Life After Birth Trauma book. And you're going to be the first of 3 interviews that I'm going to be doing with the co-authors of the Life After Birth Trauma book that will have literally just been released and is available in all the usual outlets. And from my point of view as a kinesiologist who's worked for many years with trauma, with scar work, with fertility, with kind of aiding pregnancy at various stages and in various ways, it's a real honor for me to take part in this, and so I'm really grateful to be talking to you today. But I'd like, if we can, for you to just start and tell a little bit about your birth trauma story. What actually got you involved into this book?
Okay, so Jessica Prime, who is putting the book together and is one of the authors herself, contacted me on Facebook. Actually, I can't really remember how it all happened, but it kind of, we were friends on Facebook for a little while beforehand, and she was interested in what I was doing because there aren't very many of us around the UK. And she asked me, gosh, I don't know how long ago now, it must have been 8-9 months ago, if I'd be interested in getting involved, and I said yes, although I'd never done anything like this before. It is something that's very close to my heart, and it's something I work with every day. I work with women every day who've gone through difficulties with one thing or another, and men as well, and healthcare professionals, which I do mention in the book. And I thought it would just be really interesting to be able to see if I'd got enough information in my head to make something of it, to actually put it down on paper. It's something I've never thought of doing before, and it turns out that actually there's quite a lot of information in my head that I need to get paper. And I had to just skate over the surface in the chapter, because otherwise it would have just become ridiculously huge. So it was very cathartic as well for me myself.
Because you also, the main emphasis in the book for you is looking at the kind of the therapeutic side of it and all of the work that you can do to help. But you also experienced birth trauma as well, didn't you?
I did, and it's something that I don't really I certainly don't talk about on a day-to-day basis. It's something that I feel I've dealt with as well as you can, really, and it did bring up some difficulties at the time writing about it, but I did skate over the surface, writing my notes for this today. So I've written, I don't know, about 10 sides of A4 note form. It's kind of re-dug up issues that I'm going to have to go away and sort out. Because I did have birth trauma myself, not in and of the birth itself, but because I'd experienced childhood sexual abuse. So I was abused initially by a stranger when I was probably 6 or 7 years old in a park. And then I was abused on a number of occasions by a neighbour. And, you know, as a child, you kind of bury those memories. They come back and bite you on the backside when you least expect it. And having a baby was one of those times when it's come and kicked me right up the backside. And caused me a lot of mental anguish, really. That's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah, I found it quite moving when, you know, as you say, you went through your story actually quite quickly in the book, but I was really kind of moved by your description of your dissociation during birth, and, you know, recognizing that as a defensive strategy that we can use to protect ourselves, to try and not experience things that are painful, and just really quite interesting that history for you took you back into that same place again.
Yeah. I've always been an introverted kind of person, and it kind of sat with my personality to be very, very quiet and passive throughout my pregnancy, you know, throughout examinations, throughout the labour and birth. So nobody would have been able to tell that there was anything amiss, because it was all going on in my mind. And so the dissociation part, I didn't know what that was at the time, but looking back, having investigated and researched, you know, quite extensively since then, I realised that I was able to actually detach from what was going on, and I can still do that fairly easily. And it's something that I do recognise in women I'm looking after occasionally.
Yeah, and it must be actually a very difficult thing for anybody who's in therapeutic support, anybody who's in medical support, to actually be able to recognize, even when people are, you know, from my perspective, I see it as leaving their bodies. They're kind of stepping outside of their embodied state and coming, you know, kind of observing things from a different space as a protective mechanism. But to actually be able to recognize that must be really difficult for anybody in kind of mainstream conventional care that doesn't have quite an extensive background in psychology and psychological defense mechanisms.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about numbers today, you know, 30,000 estimated women are suffering from PTSD and birth trauma in the UK at the moment. We're looking at estimations of 1 in 4 women who have gone through childhood sexual abuse. So these are numbers. So a quarter of all the women we're seeing potentially have got some kind of abuse history. And, you know, it's just mind-blowing, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, and I was kind of curious as well as to whether or not you consider that 30,000 women a year experiencing birth trauma, do you consider that to be a conservative estimate as well?
Absolutely. I'm sure it's very conservative. Live births 2018 657076. Approximately 4.6% of all live births. We're talking 30,000 traumatic births. We're talking 4.6% of all live births. That's how I worked it out.
Sure. And that seems to me to be a very conservative estimate, given, you know, again, the kind of the figures, the people that I see. Because I don't know that women would necessarily describe the birthing process as anything than typical. You know, that it's stressful, that it's painful, that they didn't necessarily feel that they were being paid significant attention to, and wouldn't necessarily consider that as traumatic if something as monumental as this new book wasn't coming forward to say, look, you know, that there's a lot of aspects about birth that are traumatic.
Yeah. And, you know, that we're talking in those numbers of live births, we're not talking about the 4 in 1,000 stillbirth rate.
Yeah, sure.
For, every woman who has a stillborn baby is going to be traumatized, and I would say, there's going to be a certain amount of trauma and post-traumatic stress for every single one of those women.
Absolutely, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So what was it about your experience giving birth that kind of encouraged you to then move into this career to be a midwife initially, and then also the certified birth trauma resolution practitioner?
Okay, so my first birth, I kind of just got through, for want of a better word. I did what I could to get through and be alive at the end of it. With a healthy baby. My second and third births, I was very much more determined to do it more the way I wanted to do things. So when I had my son, my second baby, I stayed at home for as long as absolutely possible before I went to the hospital, and literally he was born within 12 or 13 minutes of getting there. So I only just made it. Oh.
Well done.
I refused to have stitches afterwards as well, because the stitches with the first birth were probably where most of my PTSD came from.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, and then my third baby I had at home, so nobody was going to tell me how to do things for that one, and that was when I decided this is what I want to do. I want to be a midwife, because the home birth midwife I had then was absolutely amazing, and she literally sat in the corner of the room. She was knitting, like in the old stories they say midwives sit and they don't do anything unless things are needed to be done.
Yeah.
And she was just a shining example. Can I give her name?
Of course, yeah.
Her name is Sue Skirm, and I know she's retired now, but she was the one that just made me want to do the job she was doing, because she was just brilliant. She was so supportive, but not in my face all the time.
An absolute credit to where credit's due as well. I think whenever we've got outstanding practitioners who are able to be a guiding light to us, really to give us a model, then they really deserve that recognition.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we're really lucky down here in Shrewsbury to have a lady called Sue Barber, who's a natural birth specialist, and over the years, Sue and I have had all sorts of interactions, and kind of supported clients and various things. And it's always just amazed me the space that she goes to with that, and again, it's taught me a lot. And one of the resounding things that sat with me about Sue's work is, she says, birth isn't a medical event, it's a natural event, and occasionally it needs medical intervention.
Yeah, definitely. And midwives believe that.
Yeah.
That's the tenet of our way of being, really. Birth is a natural, normal event unless it needs help in some way.
So what do you consider to be the issues about how pregnancy and birth are dealt with by the NHS? Why do we have so much birth trauma? Why do we have so many women feeling out of control or having a process that they don't feel respected and honoured in? What's your take on that?
I think the NHS maternity services, as they are, they're just it's pushed by the sheer number of people going through it. There are so many more complex cases as well, so there aren't just I hate to use these terms, but it's just easier to summarize. Straightforward, fit, healthy women going through a normal, natural event. Yes, sure. The majority are. But a lot of women have other stuff going on. There's underlying medical conditions often. There are more complicated pregnancies. There are far more older first-time mums going through the pregnancy services that need closer attention, potentially, for developing more complications throughout the pregnancy, although the majority of them are absolutely fine as well. It has to be said.
Yeah.
But I think it's just the way the service is at the moment. It's trying to get through as many people through a chain of events as possible with as little difficulty along the way, and human beings just we don't fit into boxes. Women in pregnancy have different needs at different points. Midwives have different times that they need to spend with women. Some women need longer, some women are fine with shorter appointments for the occasional appointments. There are just so many variables that are very difficult to fit into a particular system that flows freely.
And do you think as
the biggest factor, I think?
Sure. And do you think as well, you're talking about a number of women who wouldn't fit into that healthy, perfectly healthy category. Do you think that enough time is given on educating couples from a preconception point of view about what their health demands might be during pregnancy and after, and what they can do to really support and look after and prepare themselves for pregnancy, for parenthood?
I think there's very little time spent on prenatal care in this country, because it's just another area that needs to have more time and money spent on it and resources spent on it. I think we're struggling so much with what we've got at the moment that having something else is just going to tip the balance on an already overstretched system.
Which is quite ironic, really, because if we were able to spend the time and the energy in that preparation work, the likelihood of difficulties, complications when we get through to the birth event are much more likely to be reduced.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. But there's a lot of it's driven financially, isn't it? What you can get, getting the most out of the budgets that the NHS are given for certain areas. And it's really sad. Lack of money, lack of resources, a lack of time. Healthcare practitioners are all stretched to breaking point. It isn't, the way they're working isn't particularly healthy a lot of the time either. They're working long hours.
Yeah.
Clinics are always really rushed and busy. It's easy to miss things that you really shouldn't be missing. And of course, mental health issues. There's a far more understanding that there are women coming through the system that have underlying mental health issues, and I don't mean serious mental health conditions. I mean anxiety-related issues.
Yeah.
Things that need time spent on them. They need one-to-one support and continuity of care, simple things that we've been talking about for 30, 40 years within maternity services, but that we're trying very hard to get a handle on, and we do to the best of our ability, but it's still very, very difficult because you're constantly pushed and pulled left, right and centre.
Yeah. So in an ideal world, what would you change and how would you do things?
Well, I think we need to remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about probably the most important time in an individual's life, bringing a brand new person into this world.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of lost sight of that. We need to bring this new person into the world in as gentle and respectful way as possible. And I think that needs to be underlying everything, and I somehow I think that's kind of been forgotten.
Really, yeah.
We're talking about the future. We're talking about the future of the human race if we're looking at it in a global sense. And if we don't rein it in and start thinking right from this fundamental perspective, then we're just losing sight of the whole thing. So we need to think about continuity of care. We need to think about getting to know our women and our women getting to know us, to build that level of trust so that we can inform them, so that they can make informed choices about what it is they're going to be going through, not us. They're going to have to live with the consequences of their choices, but they are grown women and partners and families that are perfectly capable of making choices for themselves with the information. Sorry.
That's okay. I was going to say, no, it's beautiful. And the other thing I would add into that as well is that, you talk about women knowing you and you know women, but I think one of the things that's really important is actually women knowing themselves as well, and having, from the very basics of really understanding anatomy and biochemistry of what's going on, to having emotional training, to having mental training, to being able to school and manage their own breathing and their stress responses and so on. I mean, one of the things that I do is I teach Qigong, and we spend an incredible amount of time in that, just helping people recognize their own breathing responses, their own fight or flight triggers, and just being able to not be unconsciously at the whim of all of these aspects, but recognize that there's an awareness that you can train, and with that awareness you can modulate and manage most responses to most situations.
And that begins right from the beginning of education.
Absolutely.
Be getting into schools, well, not necessarily us, but it needs to be talked about. We need to be introducing the concept of being self-aware and bodily aware, and aware of our choices, and aware of how powerful our bodies are from the beginning of our lives, really. And the education system has a responsibility in that as well. When do we ever use algebra, for God's sake?
And I think one of the things that's really being highlighted in the education system at the moment is, because of our current technological status, nobody actually needs to learn anything. The information is available. What we lack is the ability of how to think, the discernment of actually how to critically evaluate, how to research, how to understand information. Because everything we need is out there, and if I need to do an algebra calculation, I can probably get something online for free to do it for me in moments. But
Google it. Definitely. And but with that comes the training in not taking things at face value as well. Yeah. Because yes, you can find any amount of information via Google and online, but you've got to discern whether or not it's appropriate, whether or not it applies to you, whether or not it's a good idea in the first place.
Sure.
And I think the generation of parents maybe that are coming through now, we're starting to see, maybe the kind of early 20s, the social media aspect of stuff, the dissociation with reality, really. There's a lot of that going on. Celebrity culture, the perfect body, that it's a rocket that's going to go off.
Yeah, sure. Mums that are back to their size 8 within weeks of having given birth, and there's a lot of pressure and a lot of information that is omitted to present particular types of lifestyle or particular types of archetypes within people.
Absolutely. And social media is a big problem on social media with all of that.
Now, in your story, in the life after birth trauma, you credit the Miriam Stoppard pregnancy book for helping you with your birth preparation. Tell me a little bit more about that, because if anybody's listening in and they're looking for a resource or some resources, is that something that you would still recommend? And did you find that was really helpful for you at the time?
Well, it's of its time.
Okay.
That's
That says a lot.
about it. Yeah, Dr. Miriam was probably a celebrity doctor of the 1980s. I don't know, God bless her, whether she's still alive now or not. But she was kind of the pregnancy guru around at the time, because we didn't have the internet in the 80s.
Of course.
We had books, we had to go to libraries or buy books to find stuff out. So we didn't know what was out there until we went looking, really.
Yeah.
And before that, probably 10 years, 20 years before that, it was what your mum told you and what your granny told you, which could be very helpful or extremely unhelpful.
Sure, yeah, depending on the size of the family network, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So Dr. Miriam Stoppard probably was the nearest I got to learning about anatomy and physiology and the way things worked and the way babies grew, and not so much about what to expect, because it was a very medicalised view of labour and birth and pregnancy. But at least I had a little bit of information, because there really wasn't any anywhere else. You didn't particularly get anything from your midwife. You used to just go when you were supposed to go, and you had your blood pressure checked and your urine dipped and you were weighed, and they listened to your baby occasionally, and that was about it, really.
Yeah.
So things have improved, I think.
And I think there's something as well about us as a British population that we're very, or we try and present this very kind of, don't make a fuss about it, let's just get on and deal with it in a very rational and almost cold kind of fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't rock the boat.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, in your experience as well, what can you say about the preparation that you see within families ahead of birth in your experience?
Well, you've got kind of two approaches. So you've got one approach where couples will be, or mums, because that's who I see mums to be, will say, I don't want to know anything. I'll just go with the flow, and I'll deal with whatever comes up on the day. That's a really difficult place to know where to go. They've all already kind of closed off to you. They don't particularly want to hear about how you feel, and we shouldn't be telling them how I feel personally.
Sure.
Everything we talk about should be in their best interest. So it's about wording, it's about the use of language, it's about opening up experiences, potential areas to gain information and knowledge for them, so that they can then go away and find out for themselves. That is, in my mind anyway.
Yeah.
And then you've got a lot of parents, a lot of mums who want to know absolutely everything to the nth degree, and put themselves under a lot of pressure to attain what it is they feel is the ideal way of being. And then you've got, there are three groups, actually. I said two. There are three. The ones in between who kind of do maybe a bit of both, or a bit of neither, or just kind of float along in between. In my mind, I think the underlining sentence is knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
If you're coming from a place of knowledge, you've got a certain amount of power then. So I think personally, and this is very personally, that you need to inform yourself about what potentially is going to happen. You need to have an idea about what's going to go on, at the very least.
And do you think that the kind of those who just go with the flow and see what happens, and those who are in that middle ground, do you think that they're more likely, that they are kind of the precursors who are more likely to experience some form of PTSD within birth trauma?
Funnily enough, in my experience, the ladies that tend to just not necessarily look into things, not necessarily investigate and spend time on preparation, they tend on the whole just to get through, because their expectations are very different.
Right.
Sometimes if expectations are, you put a lot of expectation on yourself to perform in a certain way or to achieve a certain result, it can be very difficult for you mentally when things don't go to plan. So I think somewhere in the middle is the best way to be. So yes, to understand the way your body works is really, really important, and to give credit for how amazing your body is, and to really start what's the word, gaining faith in the way your body works, and understanding that it does what it needs to do if it's allowed the time and the space to do that, and the support to do that. And it's really difficult to be able to do that in the time that we get to see women in the kind of the model of care that we have at the moment. It's a hard act to kind of, because you have to start almost from the beginning, right at the beginning. Getting women to realise how awesome their bodies are.
Yeah, and we wander around in this incredible machine that can self-regulate, self-repair, and do a whole bunch of stuff, and we never really acknowledge just how phenomenal it is at times.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what else would you consider to be the more likely precursors, or the more likely reasons why somebody might end up with a post-traumatic stress disorder following a birth event?
I think the precursors. Okay, so prior mental health issues, obviously, it makes sense, doesn't it? Really.
Yeah.
If you've had prior anxiety issues or sub-threshold mental health issues, mild mental health issues, it's not going to take a lot to tip that balance and send you somewhere where you really don't need to go mentally. I think women whose first language is in English, women with disabilities, women with serious mental health issues, obviously, as well as I've already said, women in the vulnerable of society, so women in abusive relationships. That is going to there are already chinks in your armor. There are already weaknesses in your reserves. So having a birth experience that affects you mentally is going to potentially tip you over the edge if you haven't got those resources and those perhaps family members around you to support you and guide you through the post-NAPI period. I think life pressures, 21st century life pressures, there are a heck of a lot of pressures out there. Lack of money, lack of resources. People are really quick to ask for help or know where to look for it a lot of the time. They're kind of stumbling around in the dark. We live in a very technological age, so like we said before, everything can be answered at the touch of a button, but it doesn't always give us what we need. Yes, we can answer, an algebra question or whatever by Googling it, but it's got to come from within us. What we need personally and individually we've got to balance those answers out with what we actually need as human beings and as individuals. And I think feeling that the healthcare professional sitting in front of you has empathy enough for you to allow you to open up, knowing that you won't be judged, and that social services won't be contacted if you say, look, I'm struggling here. Because a lot of women will say, I'm worried, if I talk about this, that they're going to take my baby away. Is the bottom line. And I think it just goes back to having a relationship of trust and kindness and respect and lots of information for women, impartial information, signposting them to places that may be able to help them, to people that might be able to help them, alternatives. So you and I both work in the alternative world. There are a lot of things out there that will help women, and it's their choice if they want to look at things in a different way. It's absolutely their choice. They shouldn't be berated for that or made to feel that they're weird or whatever.
No, absolutely not. And two of the things that I really liked in reading your story in the Life After Birth Trauma book were the idea of a positive birth rehearsal, which is a service that you offer within your practice, and also the birth debrief. So tell me a little bit about both of those and what you see as their value, their importance, and the contribution towards having a positive birth experience.
Okay, so when I do my birth trauma work, so when I do my when I see a lady, or I've only ever seen one man, I'll be honest, it's usually ladies that come to see me. We work on the birth trauma, and I always say to them, if you get pregnant again, or quite often they are pregnant when they come to see me because they want to just change the story for this labour and birth. They want to start off from a strong place rather than a very rocky memories place. I always offer them something called a positive birth rehearsal under hypnosis, where whilst they're very calm and relaxed, and their subconscious is the part that's listening to what I'm asking them to visualize, we look at what they want to achieve in an ideal world. So it's quite loose, because obviously I don't know what's going to happen on the day, and they don't know what's going to happen. But it's about raising expectations within themselves, feeling that they're coming from a really strong place, moving forward when they go to have this next baby. It's about getting rid of the fears from the past. It's about feeling they've got a voice, really, so that they feel able to ask for what it is they need, and that people around them are going to listen to them. So the positive birth rehearsal, it works amazingly well. It's incredibly simple. It's telling a story while someone's relaxed, basically, and getting to imagine what it's going to be for them, going to be like for them on that day.
Yeah. And of course, that's beautifully setting up the nervous system to then follow a particular pathway, rather than either being shocked or surprised, or coming up with some other idea that could be subconsciously implanted, depending on what that person has been aware of or has been experiencing through their lives as well.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And the debrief, there are most hospitals, most maternity units offer a debriefing service. I know we certainly do in Leicestershire, for women who want, and the women in partners, couples who want to go and talk about what actually happened during their labour and birth. So it's more of a timeline of filling in gaps, having the opportunity to ask questions about why things happened, why things didn't happen. But there is a question around debriefing, whether it can actually re-traumatise.
I'm sure, yeah, if it's not done appropriately.
Absolutely. So whoever's doing the debriefing needs to be woman and birth partner led. So they need to be the ones calling the shots all the way through. It needs to be what they need to know, not what the health practitioner needs to be known, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
It shouldn't be a box ticking exercise, and I think some possibly are. There shouldn't be any time limits either, so it should be quite a free, relaxed session, where anything that comes up can be discussed, and you know, the couple can be signposted to further services if they need them.
And you see, as I consider that as well, and I think about the idea of a debrief, there's a part of me that's thinking, well, surely this should be mandatory. Surely women should be encouraged to sit down with somebody who's appropriately qualified, has the appropriate information, to actually just be able to go through that birthing process, just to ensure that there isn't anything that's been misunderstood, and there can be a heads up for any support that woman, that those parents might require in those initial months of raising that brand new life.
Absolutely, yeah. Just you know, it doesn't have to be. It can be an informal question. How did your birth go? You know, in the first few days after they're at home with their new family. How did you what was the experience like? You know, tell me about what it was like for you. Have you got any questions about it? It is a conversation, but it often it isn't done. Women and their partners do need the opportunity to be able to talk about it, because with birth trauma and post-traumatic stress, I think it's seen as a moment in time a lot of the time. Birth trauma and things that went on that made a woman or her partner feel unhappy or sad, or where they felt things weren't going the way they should have gone. Sometimes it's seen as a case of, well, yes, that went on, but we're okay. I'm alive. We've got a healthy baby. Let's just put it in the past. Let's forget about it, because actually, you know, what's important is here. It's really important to talk about that, because it, as I said right at the beginning, it will kick you up the backside every now and again. And you deserve to heal from that experience. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to ask questions, and you deserve to feel very proud of yourself for what you've achieved. Because life is incredibly important, and we shouldn't be, and birth is incredibly important, of course, as well. We shouldn't be kind of papering over the cracks and hoping that everything's okay in the next year or so. It needs dealing with.
Sounds a bit like Brexit, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, we all deserve to be heard, don't we? And
sure.
And to feel good about this momentous time of our lives, really, bringing a new baby into the world, it's important.
Yeah. One of the things I really loved in your section of the book as well is part of the advice that you gave in there. You broke down into a beautiful acronym called POWERS, and I'd really love for you to just briefly talk about each one of those, if you'd be kind enough, and share with us how POWERS can make a difference in the birth experience.
Okay, well, I was quite proud of POWERS.
Good. It's a great idea.
I was trying to think, when I was writing the chapter, how I could get across something in a really easy, memorable way. And as a midwife, we have training days, and they often use words that we remember the first letter of like emergency procedures that we follow. Mm-hmm. By the way, I can never remember those.
But POWERS is going to become a household thing, isn't it?
So POWERS, yeah. What I did was I wrote a list, I think probably of 12 different things that I felt were really important, and then thought of some words that I could fit those those ideas into, and POWERS was born. So P stands for positivity, so I'll just go through it really quickly. O stands for organisation. W stands for wisdom, which some people may or may not agree with in my chapter. E stands for environment, a massive. I could have written a whole book about environment. R was a difficult one. So I made that stand for relax.
Yeah.
And S stands for support. So with each of those ideas, started off with the positivity. So helping young girls to realise how amazing their bodies are right from the word go. So going through the education system, we need to honour our bodies and realise what an amazing machine we live in. And when we start from that strong place, we've got a position of power. And yeah, so it made me cry actually writing that part. And again, I had to just skate over the surface because I didn't want it to become too long and drawn out, really.
Sure. But also I'm looking forward to the fact that we just had an exclusive that in the near future you can look forward to Jackie Allatson's book on her powers, and especially on the environment, the birth environment, and how important that is, because as she's just said, there's a book in it. So at some point we're going to be sitting down to have another conversation about that, I hope.
Yeah, and yeah, with you going through all of the others. So the organisation was obviously looking at ways that women could find support from other women in groups in their own geographical areas. Really, really easy to do because we've got Google at the end of our, fingertips. It's a very simple thing to do. And then the W for wisdom, about our inner wisdom, our small voice that knows what to do and what to say, what to believe, and how to get us motivated as well. And I think again that needs to be something that is reinforced and is established and then reinforced in our children.
And I think that was one of the most resounding aspects of the whole book, is how often, and you see this in almost every story in the Life After Birth Trauma book, that almost every woman had a sense that something wasn't going as it should do, but they didn't seem to be able to communicate that effectively or have that heard effectively by the medical staff that they were with.
Yeah, definitely. And there have been changes, I feel, because I was out of the NHS for about 3 years, and I've been back in it for getting nearly 2 years now. And in this last 2 years, I've noticed that is changing. We, as healthcare professionals, we are listening much more seriously to the inner feelings of what our women are telling us, and taking them seriously, which is food for my soul. Certainly it's what is keeping me going, and this inner wisdom, I can't express how important it is to listen to that. And then of course environment, where you have your baby, is really, really important. So depending on what is appropriate for you, and of course your choice.
And of course a lot of women don't even realise that there is a choice, would you say?
Absolutely. The majority of women don't realise they have a choice, and that scares me. Every day I hear that, and I don't understand, because these are healthcare professionals that I know.
Right.
They're not necessarily telling women about all of their choices. And I'm not having a go at anybody.
Sure.
I know how busy everybody is, and I know there's so much to get through, that maybe this is one of the things that falls through the nets. But it is incredibly important. It's the foundation from which a woman can plan what is potentially going to be happening to her in the next 8 or 9 months. So thinking about where you want to have your baby and exploring all of those possibilities should be down to the woman's choice, and talking in conjunction with the healthcare provider.
And I've spoken to many women over the years as well when they're having difficulty with their fertility. If we take a slightly kind of rough comparison, that often animals that are held in captivity won't start to reproduce until they feel the environment is safe and secure. So when we're looking at the birth environment as well, whatever it is, and wherever it is, there should be that sense of security, that sense of safety for the woman giving birth, because otherwise they're simply not going to be able to do the R of powers. They're not going to be able to relax. And of course, that tension is going to change biochemistry. It's going to change heart rates. It's going to change a whole bunch of other things within their bodies that are not going to allow that natural flow of birth to take place so easily.
Absolutely, and the biochemistry within their unborn babies as well. There's new research being published saying that the neurobehavioral development of unborn babies is affected by the way the mother is perceived during her birth, the way she feels during her birth experience too. So we're looking at as I said, we're looking at the future of mankind, of humankind, aren't we? And we need to get right back to basics about this and do the right thing. And the balance of hormones in labour are so subtle; they can be thrown right off by the tiniest. That the lights are too bright, or somebody's voice is too loud, or there's a funny smell in the room, and it can just switch those hormones off straight away. So it's so important, environment. It's incredibly important, because mammals work in a certain way, our bodies work in a certain way, and we've got to remember that's what we are at the end of the day. We are mammals.
And I'm sure that, as a holistic practitioner, I'm sure like me as well, there's no surprise for you in the research that's showing that the babies are significantly affected by that. For us, it's that nature of holism, that these two organisms are interconnected. So a change in one is going to reflect into a change in the other. It's so logical for me. It seems daft that this is going to become a revolutionary piece of information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's what is it? Reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, sure.
That kind of concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the relaxation. You need to be relaxed in order for hormones to work properly, and to give the time for your body to do what it needs to do. And as long as everything's fine, then you need to have that time. You need to be, respected to give your body that time. And then as for support, obviously the person or the people that are with you, incredibly important. Your midwife is incredibly important. Your obstetrician, if your obstetrician is in there, is incredibly important as well. So preparing for that kind of thing. If you've got a high risk pregnancy, finding out who's likely to be there on the day is going to chase away a few of the worries and concerns that you might have, which will mean that you're feeling more relaxed and able to birth in a more straightforward way.
I love that. I honestly, I think Powers is going to become something that, because it's such a simple and straightforward thing to be able to share with couples, with women, about how they prepare for birth. I think it's a beautiful message, and I'm so glad to see it included in the book. But if, just in a nutshell, if you had to choose your most important do and don't for women who are pregnant, heading into that birth event, what would you choose as your kind of biggest do and don't?
Okay, so I think prepare. I think you need to be prepared. So inform yourself. If you're not getting information from someone else, you need to find out the information for yourself, because yes, it is a moment in time, and yes, the time will pass, and hopefully everything will be absolutely fine. But being prepared for it, having the tools in your toolkit to take along on the day, the breathing exercises, the learning how to relax the muscles of your body and the muscles of your face and the muscles, you know, within you and without you, and being in touch with what's going on within and without your body is the most important thing you can do. Going in there and just trusting to look probably isn't a bad idea, although I know a lot of women do get away with it. This is an experience. This is the most awesome thing, the most awesome event potentially you're ever going to go through. Being prepared, you know, information is power, as I said right at the beginning.
And I like the fact that you highlight in there that a lot of women get away with it. You know, that doesn't suggest that there's a degree of control within that. It doesn't suggest that there is a degree of reliance in that. They get away with it, but you know, there are too many spaces within there where that might not happen.
Absolutely. You want to look back on this time and feel. You want to grow. You want to feel that you've grown from this experience. You shouldn't feel diminished by it. I can't remember if I put that in the book, but it's something I feel very strongly about. An experience like this is so awesome that you should feel incredible when you come out of it. Yes, you might be a bit sore and a bit battered and bruised. Of course, if you look practically at it, you may well be. But you should overwhelmingly feel incredibly proud of yourself and incredibly amazed at how brilliant your body works in this kind of situation.
And that's exactly what I would like to see for every mother, every couple going into parenthood, that it all comes from good, healthy, strong foundations. Because if we're going to build a good society and have a healthy culture, then again, that kind of education, that support, that awareness from as early as possible are all the steps necessary to make that take place.
Yeah. And remembering that your body was made to do this job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jackie, thank you so much as well for today. I have no doubt that you and I could probably continue to have this conversation for many, many hours. There's so many areas that I can see commonality and kind of commitment towards the well-being of people here together, and I really appreciate that. So I'd like to say a big thanks to Jackie Allatson, certified birth trauma resolution practitioner and midwife based in Leicestershire. If you want to learn more about Jackie and her work, you can go to her website, which is www.downtoearthjackie, that's Jackie with an IE.co.uk, and you can also find her on Facebook and Instagram by searching Down to Earth Jackie. So Jackie, thank you so much for joining me on this Life Force Health podcast today, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Yay.